going on. Okay, so if I get everybody's attention back up here. So, before we get started listening, let's revisit this. Your standard is like a map. It's taking us someplace. It's giving us directions on how to get there and for us to how to know once we've reached our destination. Okay, so the component you're talking about right now is key events. It's going to be really hard because when I did this with Ms. Stuckey, I wanted to talk about the setting and the character. But right now, what component are we working on from the standard? Events, okay? All right, so let's get started. Who wants to be brave using academic language from the standard? Who wants to be brave and tell us about what they think the first event is? Let's go here with Miss James.
For the first event, I think it's the boy. I think the first event is when the boys are heading toward their favorite hill, which is Sherburne's Hill.
So we think, very good, Miss James. We think the first event is going up the hill, correct? Or going towards the hill, because that's where the boys are gonna go coast on their sleds. Very good. I agree with you, and I was so tempted to talk about the characters during this piece, because that's when you really see some of these things coming out about eventually he's going to be brave, but you see that he's scared and he walks a little slower because he has a leg issue. So I was really tempted to talk about characters, so I'm glad you stuck to just the events. But it's important to know that the boys are heading someplace. What do you think the second event was? It gets trickier in the middle here, okay? So, yes, sir.
I think the second event is I may be slow, he finally said, but I'm not afraid of the mystery.
Okay, so the conversation that you think is part of that? Could you have combined that with this one? Or do you think it's its own event?
It's more of it.
Its own event, the conversation? Okay, Ms. Stuckey?
That was a really big part to them.
I want to say that conversation piece, we struggled with that a little bit because we thought, well, maybe the memory and the conversation could be combined. But remember, the importance of this, the reason why we're doing this is so that you can have a deeper understanding of the content that you're reading. Okay? So by talking about this, it's going to give you a deeper understanding. So the boys are having a conversation. What's the conversation about? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because that's really important for these details, specific details.
The conversation was about there was a servant on the hill and he was pouring fire ashes down the hill and it was right on the hill when they were
Okay, so the conversation was about, let's go back a little bit further than that. The boys are heading for the hill. There's a conversation about Sam specifically. That's the conversation I'm talking about first of all. What are they saying to Sam in this part of the conversation? What are they saying or implying about Sam? Montrez.
And he's walking slow.
He's slowing them down, right? Because the next event is they got to get to the hill, right? So the conversation here is about Sam slowing them down. There's a little bit of character development there, which is important at the end of the story, so I'm glad you brought up that conversation. What's the third point? What's the third one? Right here.
Conversation between General Hallamand and Sam.
Okay, so the boys arrive at the hill. What do they notice? Let's go back a little before that. When the boys get to the hill, what happens? Yes.
The servant is pouring the ashes down the hill.
They're late, right? Because he's already started putting the ashes. Very good, Montrez, and we're going to read to you in just a second. So they arrive, and they see the servant of the general pouring the ashes on the hill. Okay. That's important note about the setting, too, because they have a fireplace, electricity. They don't have electricity. Anyway, that's a historical thing. So I'd love to spend time talking about the historical part of this. But remember, our standard is what? Events. Very good, okay? So, I've got to stick to the events and not talk about the setting, which is hard for me. So, they arrive late, the servant's pouring the ashes. What's the next event? I want somebody on this side of the room. I keep seeing Miss James. Very back, I think I keep missing your hand, sir. Yes? what's the next event?
They go through General Solomon house.
Okay, we got it, we missed a part, let's go back. They see that he's sprinkling the ashes. He's sprinkling the ashes. And then what happens?
He has to mention.
He tells them to leave, so there's a conversation with the boys and the servant, right? Okay. Because before that, who initiates that conversation with the servant? Who initiates? Yes, ma'am. Sam. Sam's brave. There's a conversation with Sam and the other boys because they're late getting to the hill, right? And whose fault is it that they're assuming or implying? They're implying that it's someone's fault that they're late. Yes.
They think it's Sam that they're late
And why is Sam the reason why they're late?
because he had an incident with his leg and he broke his leg and it didn't heal.
Right, right. And initially, Miss Stuckey and I thought about adding that as an event because we thought it was important to know about his leg. But they do a really good job implying it throughout the story. So you could have put that in as an event, but we didn't. That's all right. We keep going. But it's good. That's what the conversation, it was implied that he was the reason why they were late getting to the mountain or the hill. So therefore, he says to them, well, I'm going to go tell him not to sprinkle it, right? Yeah, that was a bad idea from the start. But what would that say about his character? Even though I know we're talking about the component of events, what would that say about his character? I know y'all already talked about this. He was brave. He was brave, right? I wouldn't have gone up to somebody like a police officer and said, hey, don't do that. So, they had that conversation. What comes next? You know, he tells them to go away. That's what this gentleman right here said. He says, go away. I'm not doing that. He makes some remarks about colonists. What's next? He pulled him to go where? He's trying to protect him, right? Edward is. That's a character thing, right? He's showing his character of trying to protect. But I'm not sure it's necessarily an event. However, it's an important key detail, right? And we talk about key details. When you're talking about character, that would be a very important key detail. Ron Trust, what happens next?
He threatens to go to General Holloman.
What does he do? Does he go there?
Yes.
He goes to see the general, and you're going to have to spell that for us because give us a second. Montrez. Does his last name start with an H?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just going to call him General H. Okay, we're just going to say the general.
Hallamand.
What's that?
Hallamand.
Okay, so we're going to put general, so the boys go to have a conversation with the general. Boy, and here I go again back to character. Uh-oh. That's really brave, right? Now they're knocking on the door. My goodness. Let's take a moment right now for me to tell you. We live in a time where you should not knock on strangers' doors. And so please do not knock on doors with people you don't know unless you have parents with you. Okay?
Okay.
So they knocked on the door. What happens in that conversation? What happens in that? I'm going to call on Miss James. Fixing to call some people I haven't heard from just a minute, so get ready if you've not spoke to me. All right, Miss James, what happens next?
Then he's telling General H that he's mad that his servant is dumping ashes on their favorite hill.
Very good. He tells him that the servant is dumping ashes, but then what does he ask of the general? Sam. What does Sam ask of the general? You.
He asked him to tell him to stop the servant from pouring ashes.
Okay, he asked him, please, stop the servant from pouring ashes. But what did the general say? What did the general say to that? When he said to Sam, he said, Sam says to him, please quit dropping ashes. What was the general's response? He what? What was his first, you're right, that would be the end result, but what was the first thing initially? Initially, what did he say?
You win, my lad, he said, smiling.
Okay, he says, you win, my lad. But initially, doesn't he say, Miss Stuckey, am I wrong? Let me go back, let's go to page 116. I think it's an implicit one. Okay. See if you can find it. Let's get them around the paragraph it's in. 24. So it's not a word, which means it's implicit, it's not clearly stated. And my friend in the back, you got the hand up, go.
General Hellman frowned and Edward tugged at Sam's sleeve.
So initially he frowned at him. That tells us, nah, this kid, what's this kid thinking, right? So he frowned initially. Yes, sir, you want to add more?
And then in 24 it says, "Let's go," he whispered, but this time Sam stood his ground for 10 long seconds. No one moved.
Can you imagine 5 minutes here quiet about killed me a few minutes ago? 10 seconds in front of someone like a general. That's brave. And also him making them wait 10 seconds. I'm thinking he's going to tell the kid no, but then he doesn't. What does he do? What does he end up saying? You said it earlier. You win, lad. You win. What's a lad? What's a lad? Yes. A person, a young child. All right. So very good. He says, you win. So we got one more event that occurs that we think is important. Yes, ma'am.
He said he was telling them not to act.
That's part of the first event. They had the conversation, and again, conversation with General, and Sam wins that conversation. And then what happens? Montrez.
Then the general, he says, there are already bad feelings between our army and the people of Boston.
Okay, that's still part of this conversation, right? That's still an event. So after this conversation, what happens? Very back. Yes, sir.
He moved his servant out the hill.
They go outside, and then when they get outside, there's a conversation, right? What's that?
The conversation says Joshua patted Sam on the back. You can have first coast tomorrow.
So if I'm implying what's going on there, would I imply that they were angry at Sam?
No.
What is being implied here? What is being implied? Because remember, it's not on here, but part of the standard in the ALDs is making finding details that are implicit. Yes.
They're trying to be protective of his friend and his brother.
They are. Are they kind of celebrating a little bit?
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen tomorrow, Miss James?
Tomorrow they're gonna let Sam have the first coast.
Right. Sam gets to go first, right? And while this isn't important for events, I just have to tell you because the story is so good. I think the most important line is when he says, when he's on the coast or he doesn't have to worry about his leg. Somewhere it says that, right? So he can be fast like the other kids when he's on this sled. I thought that was really important. This story was great, Miss Don. I'm glad you picked it. So these are our events. Now we're not done because let's look at the standards. Somebody tell me what we're supposed to do with events. Look at the standard and use that language. I don't know if you have your hand up or you have your hand up or you're just stretching.
You can call on
Go ahead.
Well, the events is about drawing on specific details in the page.
To do what? What are we doing with the events?
We're trying to see what's the real meaning of the.
Okay, we gotta do, remember this is a roadmap and it tells us we gotta know the events, but what do we do with the events? Montrez.
We figure out the characters' interactions.
For events, what do we do? That's character. What do we do for events? Yes.
We compare and contrast the
Very good. We compare and contrast. So in order to prove that we can do the standard, we gotta compare and contrast all these things, but right now we're just working on events, right? Because that's the component. All right, Ms. Steph, you lead us through that.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is contrast two events. So if we're contrasting, what are we doing with the events? We're looking for,
We're finding the difference.
we're finding the difference, that's right. Okay, so look at these events right here. And the first one that we contrast, we're gonna do together, okay? So I want you to look at number 1 and number 7.
Okay, so you're
Okay?
looking at these two events, 1 and 7.
1 and 7, okay? And we're going to contrast them.
So we're gonna make a chart here in a few minutes. You're gonna get a chance to do one of the events. So pay attention to how we're doing the chart because you're gonna do it on your own paper by yourselves.
I know that you've had experience doing a Venn diagram, okay? That's a good way to compare and contrast things. We're gonna do it a little bit more like a T-chart on this one, okay? Okay. So, if you look at event number 1, and look at events number 7, over here, I want the details that tell us how they are different, how they contrast, okay? So number 1, read that. Number 7,
Look in your book.
okay?
Remember, you
Now
gotta
we
use
need
details.
details, that's right, okay? Up here, I just kind of paraphrased it. I just wrote what that whole event was. Now we're gonna break it down into specific details that explain how those two events are different. So
Yeah.
event number 1 is when the boys are heading to the hill.
All right, we're gonna depend on you, so you better be looking on those details. We're gonna call on the least person that looks like they don't wanna do it.
So number 1, they're headed to the hill. Number 7, they're headed back from the hill, they're headed home. Okay? That's one obvious difference, right? Okay? Tell me a detail about another difference. What is that?
A difference about the first one compared to the second, is that the 7th they're heading home and the first one they're heading to the hill.
Okay, that is one difference, okay? Can you read me a phrase
From the text.
or a sentence from that text that is specific to tell me that they are headed somewhere?
The snow squeaked beneath their boots as the 3 boys tramped toward Sherburne Hill, their favorite coasting hill in all of Boston.
What line was that on?
What paragraph?
Number 1.
Number 1.
Very good. Number 1 is where you
And
read.
sentence one,
Okay.
say sentence one.
They tramped towards Sherburne's
Yeah,
Hill.
3 boys tramped towards Sherman's Hill.
All right.
I haven't used that in a long time. I'm gonna have to use that.
We like fun.
Tramped, that's
Yeah.
a good word.
It is, I'm not, that's a good word for writing.
Mhm.
I've heard of trample, but tramp. I'm gonna try it. All right, so now let's look at the other side of that, which is the 7 details, because we said it was different, contrasting.
What's the detail for number 7? Who doesn't have a turn?
My friend right here doesn't have it.
Oh, okay, right there.
Right here, tell us, sir, give us a detail from when they're heading
It tells
home.
us they're headed home.
The other page. Yep, we're heading home.
You can have the first test tomorrow, he said. Sam's eyes shone. The sun will fly faster than
Keep reading. boys?
The boys tramped home. Oh, the boys tramped home together through the snow, and no one told Sam to hurry up.
Okay, so the boys
Dang.
said tramp home, but I like the first one you picked a lot, because it was implied what was happening, right? And that's one of the things, is we gotta infer and imply. So it implied they were heading home, but then the author says, let me just clear it up for you and state it explicitly, and then you read that, so very good.
Okay, that's one way that they're different, okay? Beginning of the story, they're headed up there, and all these things happen. At the end of the story, they're headed down. You gave me specific details because you quoted me phrases or sentences from the story. Okay, you didn't just say, well, I think, okay, you gave me the evidence. That's one way that those two events are different. Now I want you to dig a little bit deeper. What's another way that they're different?
Oh, to me, the next one is the most obvious.
You think so?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
oh,
okay,
yeah.
I thought this one was the most obvious.
Well, yeah,
What's
you're
another?
right, it is most obvious. This is
No,
another
it's
good one.
different for different people.
Okay,
What's
you
another
wanna
one?
see more hands than just the three we keep seeing?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, tell us what's one.
7 is kind of like they celebrated on the way home.
Yes,
Yes! Okay, give me a detail that proves that.
Back outside, Joshua and Edward whooped and shouted in the falling snow.
Okay.
I love that. Josh and Edward hooped and shouted in the falling snow. So they were celebrating, weren't they? Let me just note that you're doing a wonderful job on that anchor chart. Had I done it, you would think you were at the doctor's office, because my handwriting and spelling. Okay, so what about the very first event? The very first, Montrez, go ahead.
Our first event, I think they were like rushing Sam. They were saying, hurry Sam, called Edward.
So was it a happy time, you think?
No.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I currently have an injury, and trying to keep up, I always feel like I always feel less than everybody else, like, you know, can't keep up, so I understand how Sam feels.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Miss Wright should consider how Sam feels. With those long legs she has and my short legs and injured.
Okay,
Alright.
they were rushing to
So-
get there. And what else? In their rushing, what else is happening?
When we were rushing Sam, Sam struggled to keep up with his brother and his friend because his right leg was stiff and it slowed him down.
Okay, so they're rushing Sam and he's slowing them down, isn't he?
What do they say to him that's really really implies that he's the problem? Miss James.
It says in paragraph 9, sure could have said Joshua looking at Sam next time he says him.
Oh, but we gotta go, that's in another scene, so let's go to, another event, let's go back to event 1. But you're right, that is another example of them saying, come on, man, you're the reason. But we're looking at event number 1, okay? So, I just called a neurologist, but I love how eager your hand is. I'm gonna call on this person right back here. I don't hear your name, go ahead.
They're it looks like they like said it mean because it's in quotes. It says, you're making us late again.
Very good. That's the one I was looking for. If everybody goes to paragraph 3, hurry, Sam, called Edward. I don't like Edward, y'all. Hurry, Sam, you're making us late again. Right? So, poor Sam. That's all right, because Sam has his day in scene 7, doesn't he? Well, actually, event, sorry, thinking of the play. Event 6 and 7. Because I'm going to make this into a Broadway play. Using your events. I'm going to make $1 million off this. All right.
Okay.
Very
So
good.
that's 2 different examples of showing things that are the contrasting 2 events, okay? We found 2 details for both these events, contrasting it,
Okay.
okay? So our standard doesn't just say contrast, what else does it say? What?
Event
you're gonna make sure we can take that one. You were right, Miss Duncan. You're gonna make the T-chart, okay? And you're gonna put compare at the top. But Miss Stuckey's gonna do it right here just to show us, but you can go ahead and get started with your T-chart. While she's writing the model up here for you, you can go ahead and start thinking about what events you're gonna compare. You get to pick. Isn't that what we said in the study? We're gonna let them pick. We're gonna let them pick to compare. You can't use ours. We've already contrasted. We did different. You have to choose to compare. Alright, so like you sit here, Teresa. So she's setting up your format so that you can draw that on your paper. Now, Ms. Stuckey, do we want to let them talk to each other, or are they doing it independently?
I think conversation is good.
Okay.
Helps you,
What if we don't have
helps you
You
figure
can,
things out.
can he move to that seat and talk? No? So
No, I'll
you-
take care
you'll
of it.
fix it? Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna team people up to talk.